Hello and welcome to the Empower Her Collective show. I'm your host, Dr. Celia Corbo, entrepreneur and licensed chiropractor. Join us on our guest speaker episode as we dive into stories of remarkable women making a difference and transforming their dreams into reality. Today on the show, we have Emma Jack. Emma is a certified sport and orthopedic physiotherapist who owns Press Play Physiotherapy and Pilates in London, Ontario. And she's traveled the world as a lead therapist with the Canadian women's hockey team. While these accomplishments bring a sense of pride, Emma also acknowledges that they also contributed to feelings of intense anxiety, chronic stress, numerous health issues, and deep burnout. Emma has since transformed her clinical practice and life in recent years to ensure that her achievements no longer define her. She now dedicates much of her time to working as a certified coach, helping other women in healthcare show up fully for their lives and careers in a way that feels authentic, sustainable, and most importantly, fun. Hi, Emma. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so
Well, thank you for saying yes to coming on. Like I said before, I've been silently following you on Instagram for so long, and I love seeing your account. I love seeing what you're posting because it hits home for me as a fellow clinician.
Oh, well, that is always like my biggest hope is that my whole goal, even in starting that Instagram account, was just to authentically share my lived experience and help even just like one other person out there feel seen.
Yeah.
That's sort of what maybe they're going through. They're not alone at all in. Because I know when I was kind of like in it, I was looking around and being like, nobody else feels this way. No. Okay.
I'm the only one. Like, what's wrong with me?
Fun and that can bring on so much like shame and guilt and
Yeah.
just to know that like it lands with you and it resonates with you and makes you feel some sort of way is just like my biggest delight.
Oh, absolutely. I remember even one time I was amidst hiring a massage therapist. And one of the things that we were talking about in discussion was how no one's really there to support us as clinicians. And I really, from day one, wanted to also have some kind of network or some kind of community where we can all support each other because you don't realize it when you're in school with all your fellow physiotherapists or your chiropractors, and you're all kind of going through the journey together. And then you graduate and you leave and you're like, oh, it's really quiet now. Like it's really lonely. And I can see why some people go into being an associate, but that was never my journey or my path. It was always to open up my own practice. I'm like, oh, this is really, really
It's
quiet.
yeah, especially owning your own business, right?
Yeah.
It's just that extra level. And I think for so many, I know for myself, being a helper comes so
Yeah.
naturally to me.
Yeah.
And, I got into healthcare because I wanted to help others and serve others. And so, even just that tendency I've noticed within myself, it's so easy for me to fall into that role while not creating the space for me to be helped by somebody else, right? It's so much
Absolutely.
I have always been, I obviously this has been part of my work. I've always been so comfortable helping others, but not always as comfortable receiving help and receiving
Yeah.
support and even seeking that support, thinking,
Yeah.
I've got this, I can do it on my own, but then feeling like, oh, but I really want to help you. And so I think that's naturally something that can come up for a lot of us in healthcare
Yeah.
is that feeling of, ooh, wait, I maybe actually also need to receive. So I always, I love my role now that I do of like helping the helpers. That also
Yeah,
feels good.
absolutely. And we appreciate it because there's not a lot of help out there for us. And I know even for myself, I'm diving a lot into the business side of things right now. And it's very much like that mathematical, analytical business mind. And it's like, okay, this is amazing. I understand how the business is supposed to operate, but can we do it from a healthcare perspective now? Like, can we look at it in the lens of just like a different perspective of like helping people and not just making a profit? Like, how can we do both?
Yeah.
Right. So I really appreciate that coming from you.
Aw, well, thank you.
Of,
Thank you.
of course. Well, I want to know, okay, your bio's amazing and you did so many amazing things, but I want to hear your story through physiotherapy and then kind of finding your new identity in coaching and how it led you onto this path of helping other female entrepreneurs in the clinical health space.
Yeah. So, I mean, if I look back, I wanted to be a physio from a very young age. I was probably like preteen. I grew up dancing, doing gymnastics. I was hurt all the time. And so found myself, in a physio clinic at a fairly young age. And I just remember and still have like so much reverence for the physio that I worked with. I just looked up to her so much. I thought she was so cool. I loved the environment. I found it like really uplifting and motivating, and saw how like active it was. And I think, my experience with that was like at that sort of tender age of, I don't know, 11 or 12, I was like, oh, this seems so cool. This is what I want to do. And really, if I look back, like from that point on, everything I did was kind of in service of like reaching that goal.
Hmm.
I did a high school co-op placement in a physio clinic. I did my undergrad in kinesiology and went straight into my master's in PT, and was really fortunate because had like such a vision of what I wanted to do. I scooped up so many opportunities along the way. I worked with my university football team for all four seasons as a like student therapist, and like I got to work with the Canadian basketball teams as a junior therapist. And so graduated PT school and knew like, oh, I like really wanted to work in sport.
Yeah.
And so I pursued a sport fellowship post grad at Western University here in London, where I still live, and sort of did that sport fellowship. Like, again, worked in football, like, got so many opportunities. That's where I got my first opportunity to work with Hockey Canada, and really just set out on this path of like, this is what I want, and like, nothing's stopping me. I'm going to go ahead and like,
Move out of my way.
yeah, had all these experiences. And those experiences, like, obviously have been and were so amazing. I was also surrounded by other very high performing people, right? You sort
Yeah.
of get in these spaces and in these rooms, and you're around very high performing people. And so, I started to look at, okay, this person has done this course and this person has this experience. And I just got on this kind of hamster wheel of, getting more certifications, taking more courses, attending all the conferences, doing all the webinars, like all of
Yeah.
this stuff. And so, sort of 5 years into my career as a PT, I sort of had all the letters behind my name. I had some really epic experiences and opportunities. And I always say, from the outside looking in, my life looked amazing. I looked like I was absolutely crushing it. And I was like, I could not have been more dead inside. Like, I was just running on absolute fumes.
Yeah.
I started to like resent seeing patients. Was
I feel like you haven't really been in healthcare until that's happened.
number one sign of burnout these days. Yeah. I just like, I like wanted nothing about it anymore.
Yeah.
So it was something, I had wanted and worked so hard for. And I don't even think I was like 30 years old. And I was like,
Yeah.
oh God, like I remember clear as day going to Starbucks and being jealous of the barista, being like, honestly, like, girl has benefits. Like,
Oh my God. I know. I won't even tell you, but I will because it's, vulnerable. But I actually applied to be a flight attendant in my years of being a chiropractic
yeah.
clinic owner. Cause I'm like, they get benefits, they get pension, they get all these things. And I'm like, I don't get that. I have to pay for everything out of pocket. What the heck?
So, like, I think, like, those moments, like, that was a really big wake-up call for me
Yeah.
of, like, oh, wow, like, you are so much at this point of not aligning with anything
Yeah.
that you're doing anymore. Like, we need to take a step back. And it honestly had got to the point where, I was experiencing panic attacks before work. There was a lot of signs along the way that, like,
Mhm.
this was not the path for me. And I
Yeah.
think I tried to ignore them for a really long time and tried to cover them up with all of these sort of externally validating experiences and achievements. And I got to the point where that just wasn't going to work anymore.
Yeah.
And I remember that moment so distinctly. It was a Sunday night, going into a busy work week ahead. And I started, thinking about who I was what patients were coming in the next morning. And I had a very significant panic attack. And I just
Yeah.
remember coming out of that panic attack being like, not this. Like, I can't, not this anymore. Like, yeah,
Mhm.
it might look great on the outside, but I can't let myself live this way. And that really started me on this new path that now I have been on for almost a decade. Where, yeah, I took some time off from work. I think I at least took, it's so funny now, like I don't remember all the details as well as I should, but I think I took at least 6 weeks away from clinic. And I
That's
Googled,
brave, honestly.
it
Very
was
brave.
it was massive, like, that was
Yeah.
huge for me. That
It's
was a
huge.
signal to everyone in my life that something was up because
Yeah.
that's not how I would normally operate. And I Googled safest place to travel alone, which, for your information, is Scandinavia. So I booked a
Great
flight.
sauce there.
Awesome. I went to Iceland, Denmark, Sweden, and Norway. And it was the first time since probably I was 11 or 12 that I had just given myself space and time to just be me and not in pursuit of anything and not helping anyone, not being productive.
Mhm.
And I remember on that trip I went to in Copenhagen, there is an amusement park like right in the middle of the city called Tivoli Gardens. I think it's
Mhm.
actually where Walt Disney like based
Yeah.
uh, Walt Disney off of. And I was like on the swings by myself, early evening, like just like laughing, having the best time, and being like, oh my gosh, like I've allowed myself to become so far removed from who I am and my own joy and my own pleasure and fun. Like, I need to remember this moment.
Yeah.
And so I came back from that trip feeling like definitely refreshed, but I think for anybody out there experiencing burnout, it's not like you fix it in, even 6 weeks or a vacation. But really with this new mission of allowing myself to be more playful and to have more fun with the opportunities that I got, and really looking at how, rather than how do I fit myself into this profession, I started to look at it as, how does this profession need to look for me?
Oh, I love that so much. I
Yeah.
love that.
And like once I did that, I realized like, no, like I do want to be a healthcare provider. I just actually don't want to do it the way I've been doing it.
Yep.
And and so that's, truly when I started my Instagram account, and when it started with a blog. I just
Mhm.
thought, and it's hindsight's 2020. I started it because I wanted a hobby and activity that had nothing to do with physio.
Mhm.
And I was like, I'm going to learn how to blog. And initially, if you go back, they're all still up there. Like, I posted recipes, I did interviews with people. It was just like a fun creative outlet. And on that blog, probably only a couple months in, I just shared my journey with my rumblings of burnout and physio and what was
Mhm.
working and what wasn't working. And the response I got, like, I didn't have not that I have a massive following now, but I maybe had like 400 followers at the time, right? Like, so I didn't have a massive following, but the response I got from people and how many times people shared it with other people, and I was getting messages of, oh my gosh, me too. I realized, like, wow, okay, this is a much bigger issue than anybody is letting on. I realized how many people were suffering the same way I had been suffering, but
Mhm.
just we weren't talking about it.
Yeah.
And so that really also became a part of my mission. So I ended up opening my own practice, and my practice has never looked like or operated
After
like
all of that, you still opened up your own
I
practice?
did, because I realized,
Amazing.
I had been trying to fit myself into other
Yeah.
people's boxes.
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, the clinics I worked at were great. They were
Yeah.
amazing people, but it was just never going to, because it wasn't mine. Obviously, we
Yeah.
all have a different way of doing things. I couldn't necessarily operate in their system.
Mhm.
And, in expressing myself on my blog and through Instagram, what I realized is a lot of clients were actually starting to reach out to my clinic and saying, like, oh, I want to work with Emma, right?
Mhm.
Like, they were seeing who I was
Yeah.
and choosing me. And I realized like, oh, like there is a community that wants me to serve them. And like, what if I just did this on my own? So it wasn't right
Mhm.
away. It was probably
Yeah.
a year and a half, like 18 months, 2 years.
Mhm.
And I opened my own practice, and my goal was just to have like a small spot where I could treat, 25 hours a week and make a good income, but not feel burnt out and exhausted by it. And it was,
Mhm.
fun and light and wasn't anything too much.
Mhm.
And I built that. I built that
Amazing.
and loved it. And uh, in that process, continue to share on Instagram, the business building journey, and had so many others, specifically, definitely more women in healthcare reach out to me being like,
Mhm.
oh my gosh, like I want to do that. Can you help me? Or I'm feeling this way. Can you help me? What have you done? And so I just very organically started hosting. This is probably like 2018, started hosting Zoom calls where just women in healthcare would show up and we just share like what's going well, what are we struggling with, and just created these spaces. And that was something that I got a lot of energy from. I really loved hosting those spaces and having those conversations. And so very organically sort of fell into coaching. I have never had any intention of like, I want to become a coach.
Yeah, me
It was
neither.
very much reverse engineered. If I had all these women reaching out to me and I saw how I could potentially help serve them and
Mhm.
help them find their own path. And so, yeah, at this point today, I'll make this like long story short. I scaled that clinic and ultimately realized what I wanted was still that just small clinic that
Mhm.
operated the way I needed to. So sort of downscaled that clinic. And today about 90% of the work I do is actually with other healthcare providers, whether it's, helping them navigate burnout, whether it's helping them build a practice that feels good for them. I really pride myself on the fact that I have like absolutely no agenda in working with people. My agenda is helping them get to know themselves better,
Yeah.
that they can figure out what it is they need. And it's been absolutely incredible. And so, as much as I wouldn't and don't want to go back to those like low moments and the struggle of figuring out my way in this profession, I can see how it's like absolutely necessary for me to be able to do the work I do today and get so much fulfillment out of it. So I still do treat a little bit, but yeah, most of my work now is in the space of making sure that the helpers feel good.
Yeah, I love that. And it's especially true with what you said that you just weren't fitting the mold. Because I find in healthcare, especially here in Canada, there's a certain mentality that we have about whether it be physio or chiro or medical, and that it should be the same across every clinic that you go to,
Yeah.
which I can appreciate from a patient perspective because that uniformity of everything is reassuring and safe. But we're also human beings. Like we do things differently compared to other PTs, other chiros, other medical doctors. And we're not like cookie cutter people. We're very much like unique and creative in our own ways. So that's exactly why I wanted to start my own clinic, but then
Yeah.
also got caught up in the trap of doing things the systematic way. And I'm like, no, like what, like I'm burning out. I don't like this system for me. And having to undo that and redo it and then refigure it all out, it's courageous and a little scary.
Yeah, it's a lot of work, and like I honor you for
Yeah.
doing that work because at the outset it can seem easier not to, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's where we all can get caught in that trap of like, oh, I'm
Hmm.
going to run my own business, but I'm just going to take this system and implement it, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and I just it doesn't work. And to your point, like we are all different, and I think there's so much energy lost in pretending,
Oh my God. Yes.
right?
Absolutely.
And in
Yes.
trying to be something you're not.
Yeah.
And I think for me, that's where a lot of my burnout came from, was trying to be this like archetype of a physiotherapist and like what a physiotherapist should be.
Yeah.
And there were so many things down to even like the clothes I was wearing, where it was just like, this isn't me. I'm like this is what I think a physio should wear. Like,
Yeah.
and so once we can see our own humanity and our own personality and how that's actually really an asset and bring that to the forefront of our practices, that's where I think we're able to create better connections with our clients. That's where better outcomes happen. I think it's a disservice to try and make us all the same because
Yeah.
we aren't. No matter how you cut
No.
it, we aren't.
That's something that I tell all my patients all the time, right? Because one of the questions I do ask in my initial intake is, have you been to another chiropractor before? Have you seen any other paramedicals? Sometimes they say no, and sometimes they say yes. And the ones that say yes, I'm like, okay, what happened there? Like, tell me about it, right? Because I want to know how I can serve them in a different way. Because if they're just going to come see me and it's going to be exactly the same as how they were being seen at that other location, well then, okay, you're not gonna be happy. And I do things my way. So if they're coming in saying, well, I want this, this, and this, I'm like, I don't do that here. Like, that's just not the way that I practice. So it allows me to be true to myself and how I want to run my show so I can get you better and not just be the cookie cutter. Right.
So important. And this is
Yeah.
something I think the mental health fields do such a good job in, and we really
Mhm.
need to start taking, some of
Some
the
of
hits from that.
the
Because, so often therapists are like, let's do a quick meet and greet and see if we're a good fit.
Yeah.
And the fit is equally as important in any
100%.
physical rehab.
Yeah.
Like, we have so much evidence around therapeutic alliance and buy-in and trust in the individual we're working with. And I am not meant to work with everyone. And this is
Mhm.
where I think we can get it wrong is, just call up the clinic and they'll slot you in with the next available practitioner.
Yeah.
Like, no, I think that is like a recipe for disaster. I
Agreed.
know who like I connect with really well and it's not necessarily, a specific injury or a specific gender or anything like that, right? It's like a personality. And so
Mhm.
even making that switch in my practice of not just taking anybody who wanted to see me, um, and really seeing, am I the right fit for you? Are you the right fit for me?
Mhm.
And that takes some vulnerability in
Yeah.
sharing who you are, right? But
Absolutely.
I would much rather meet somebody and be like, oh my gosh, you were actually such a good fit for this other therapist I know. That's going to create a better outcome for them,
Yeah.
right? Which ultimately leads back to me because I'm the one who connected them. And so
Exactly.
I can still be really helpful in that way, even if I'm not the one treating them. And so I think that's a really important thing to realize and be okay with,
Yeah.
that like we're not going to help everyone, nor should we.
Yeah, and again, just bringing it back to when we're in school or when we're a patient, you think, oh, as a doctor or as a medical professional or healthcare professional, you should be able to see everybody. And one of the things that I talk about with my coaching clients is like, no, you need to niche down. And I want to talk about that with you a little bit because, again, it's one of those things we're not really taught in school is how to niche, how to focus on a specialty when you're treating the general population. Now, I understand it's a personality of a patient for sure, but can you talk to us a little bit more about niching and why that's so important, not just from a business perspective, but also from a personal, you're not going to burn out perspective?
Yeah, 100%. I think, even if I look back in PT school, like we were literally told, like, you will graduate a generalist. Like
Yes.
that was something that was almost like honored and revered, was the fact that you could do it all.
Yeah.
And it's like, just because you can doesn't mean you should.
Don't they say jack of all trades, master of none?
Yeah, exactly. And so I think the early part of my career, I was in that mentality of like, no matter the person, no matter the condition, like I should be able to help.
Yes.
And there's so much with that sentence that is wrong.
I know. I was like cringing as you said it, but I'm like, I hope we dissect it.
Right? Of like, uh almost feeling like there's no autonomy there to
Yes.
decide. And, you know, everyone, I'm sure if you're a clinician, I'm sure you can think about your schedule. And there are probably a couple people where you open up your schedule and you're just kind of like, oh, shoot, they're coming today. Right. And I think it's nothing against those actual people. I think that's really interesting information that you need to look further at. Like,
Yeah.
what is it about that interaction and relationship you formed with this person that isn't working? The more I started to dissect those, the more I realized what I did like, right? Because
Mhm.
there are usually also these like soulmate clients where you're like, this is so easy. It just clicks. They're on board. Like, even just like chit chat flows better.
Yeah.
And so it's important to look at sort of both of those archetypes. I think that can really give us some insights into where we're meant to play.
Mhm.
And when I did that for myself, it was definitely, a more active rehab, a less fix me attitude.
Yes.
Um, I was able to feel like I could be myself and be a bit more relaxed and less of this like quote unquote professional colonial kind of
Sometimes I say things and I'm like, "Oh, I shouldn't have said that." Then what can I say?
exactly where I could just be myself and they could
Yeah.
be just themselves and there wasn't this like distance between
Hierarchy.
us.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um and so yeah, I think as you get more clear on who you really light up seeing,
Mhm.
your outcomes become a lot better
Yeah.
and you start to look at your day and can look at your day with excitement and with some energy. And I think we're also, like my process was probably again probably about a decade ago, and I think even more today we're living in an age where people want the specialty, want the niche, are willing to find and, even potentially pay extra for somebody who like
Yeah.
this is their zone of genius.
Mhm.
That's something that personally when I'm looking for providers, I'm looking for.
For
And
sure.
our clients have so much more access to information than they
Yeah.
did. And there's a lot out there. And so I think if we can show people who we are and what we love and what we're about up front, that will really call forward the people who are a match to that. And by
Yeah.
not showing that, we're almost doing a disservice to the people who could be a match, but also to the people who maybe aren't a match. We could let them know a lot sooner. And
Yes.
since we aren't.
This isn't gonna work. It's a relationship. It's like you wouldn't date every person you see
Yeah,
hoping it'll end up with something. You gotta find that right match.
you got to find that right match. And I think
Yeah.
that really comes from our standpoint of going first.
Yeah.
Of being open and transparent around, what it is we strive with and are good at and really enjoy. And that does take an ounce of personal reflection and
Mhm.
getting to know yourself. But that is time best spent if you want to stay in, especially private practice. You have
Yeah.
to do some of this work and learn about yourself enough to know what will serve you best. Because
Absolutely.
when you're getting what you need, you're going to serve at like a whole nother level.
Yeah. And I think with healthcare professionals in particular, we're naturally more empathic and we naturally have this calling to want to help people. That's why we're there in the first place, to be honest. And a lot of the times, what ends up happening is we lose our passion because we're just so burnt out and we're so frustrated with the system and we feel like we're climbing this hill or rather this mountain that we can never really see the summit and we can never, and if we look back down it's too steep to go back, right? And there's a lot of guilt that I know I've experienced in my journey that, oh, I can't go back now or I can't change now because I'm on that mountain. But
Mm.
you can, you just have to find your way and you might find a path that'll lead you right to the summit, no problem, right? So
Yeah,
it's just about being open and learning because we're never not learning.
100%. And,
Yeah.
it's interesting is, I've worked with hundreds of healthcare providers at this point. And it's been really interesting because I've certainly had people who've gotten to know themselves better and had
Yeah.
the courage to make a change.
Hmm.
Just because when you were 20 years old, you decided to work in healthcare doesn't mean that you're like chained to it for the rest of your life. I've had
Yeah.
people, come start working with me, and I'm just thinking about one person in particular. She now works in the wine industry.
Oh my God, that's amazing.
Right? Like there are options. Like I
Yes.
absolutely, our paths have been finding our own way within
Hmm.
healthcare, but I would never want somebody to think there's like this crazy sunk cost that you couldn't possibly do anything else. I think healthcare and for me, physio specifically is like the best first career because you learn so much about relationship building,
Yeah.
about, critical thinking, problem solving. Like we have so many skills beyond obviously our like clinical knowledge and like anatomy knowledge. Like, yes, we have that, but there are so many other skills that are so needed and necessary in
Yeah.
so many other facets. And so, if you're the person listening to this being like, I've given it my go, and that's okay. There's no shame if it also isn't for you.
Hmm.
But I think it really is a process of having to get to know yourself first.
Yeah.
And once you know yourself and your operating systems and where you thrive and what you love to spend your time doing and how you feel fulfilled, that's going to give you a lot of answers. And so sometimes that looks like finding that niche or a specific clinical practice area to focus on. And sometimes that looks like being like, this was great for what it was. And I'm going to move on to this other thing. And that's okay
Yep.
too.
Absolutely. Again, like it's just about evolving. Like just
Yeah.
how the world has never stayed the same from the prehistoric time until now. This is the same with you, right?
Yeah.
You're always going to be changing your passions, your likes, your dislikes. They're going to change. That doesn't mean that you have to be stuck in that one position. But if you are going to continue being called back to that thing, then okay, maybe we should entertain the thought a little bit, you know? But
Yeah.
there's nothing wrong with changing. And sometimes I've even felt like a little bit of a fool. Like, oh my God, I'm doing so many different things. Like, I wonder what people think about that and that and that. And it's like, who cares? Just keep going and keep finding what lights you up because it can be so much more than one thing only, you know?
Yes, and, like, I don't know, like, this is maybe a little woo-woo, but I
I'm a very woo-woo person.
I
Don't you worry.
but that's where stuff like, like, I love bringing in aspects of, like, the Enneagram and learning more about your, personality. Not that I
Yeah.
think it's, like, a diagnosis, but, like, it's just
Yeah.
the information, and for me, learning about my human design was, like, the most validating experience of my life because,
Hmm.
there are certain people who are meant to do multiple different things and are
Yeah.
meant to continue recreating themselves. And, something that was resonant for me was, my like human design type as a projector. And I'll never forget the woman I was working with was like, honestly, your energy is probably good for about 3 to 4 hours of like amazing, focused, intense work a day. And then you are absolutely spent. And I never felt more seen
I was
than
just
in
going to say, it
that
sounds like me.
moment because I remember working at like, this busy university sport medicine clinic, 10-hour days, seeing all these other physios around me, like thriving, doing great. And me at noon just being like, oh, I'm done.
Yeah.
Oh, I have
Yeah.
nothing left to give today. And so it was just nice to know that like just because they could do it and they thrive doing that doesn't mean I have to. Like there's so many different ways you can make this work or any work for you.
Hmm.
And it really does, but it really does have to start. I know I've said this a million times now with getting to know yourself first, because
Yeah.
that's the root. If we don't know what your needs are, we can't build around it.
Yeah. And so if someone's listening in and being like, well, how do I even start getting to know myself? For
Mm,
some of us, it's really obvious and it's very easy. But for others, like they could be so deep into what they're doing, they don't know how to backpedal and look at the big picture. So how
Mhm.
would you advise someone to start reflecting on those certain qualities that gets them to step back and look at themselves a little bit more retrospectively?
Yeah, I want to acknowledge it's not easy.
No, it's not.
This is not like a little side work, right? I think there's a lot we have these days that can be a barrier to getting
Yeah.
there. I think we have we I won't speak for everyone, but myself, I know I live in a very distractible environment, right? We have our phones and social media and
Mhm.
emails and group chats and like all of these like external things coming at us. And I think it's really hard to get to know you when we have
Yeah.
all of these like external forces trying to grab our attention.
Mhm.
So to me, one of the first things is like, can you even just like be driving in the car with like no music or no podcast or nothing in your ears, right? Like
Mhm.
just starting to see how you feel when there's actually like nothing else and you just have to be with yourself.
Yeah.
I think it's that can even just tell us a lot, right? And
Mhm.
not with judgment, but just noticing like, ooh, I'm
Yeah.
really tempted to put on a podcast. I'm really
Yeah.
tempted to call a friend. Like we can be really uncomfortable just sitting with ourselves.
Mhm.
I found personally journaling very valuable just to like get clear on the stories I'm telling myself in my head and what's going on in my head. I'm somebody who has a very strong inner world, um,
Yeah.
but can also function in the outer world at the same time. And
Mhm.
so, journaling for me has been such a beautiful modality. Obviously, it's something that's like very free and somewhat accessible, right? I don't
Mhm.
think we need to go to extremes, but just like, you know, opening up a journal and writing whatever stream of consciousness comes through.
Yeah.
Even if it's like, I don't know what to write. I don't know what to write. Just let yourself like fumble with that.
That's what I
Um,
tell my patients all the time. I'm like, just even write like it was a good day, it was a bad day. Just start with anything. Like
start
no one's proofreading this. It's not going in a magazine or in a newspaper article. Like you're fine. Just write.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that process, even sometimes I'll practice. I don't know if you've heard of journal speak. It's Nicole Sachs. It does a whole thing around chronic
I've never heard of that, but I
pain.
would be
But
very interested to hear about it now.
essentially, it is just journaling, but then immediately deleting it.
Oh,
So
okay.
whether it's like, in the note section of your phone
Yeah.
or, writing pen and paper and shredding it, where you
Mhm.
can just release like some of
Yeah.
the things that like we maybe don't want to share with other people or maybe hold some shame or guilt around, but like we need to bring it up and out so that it doesn't live within us.
Mhm.
So journaling to me is very powerful. Breath work, I've found helpful. Meditation, I could get very in my head with and being like,
Yeah.
"Oh, am I doing it right? Is this? I'm not supposed to be thinking." Like, I would be very in my head with it. Whereas breath work, I was so focused on the breathing patterns
Mhm.
that I almost couldn't live in my
Yeah.
mind at the same time. And I think it does just take that extra bit of consciousness, like
Mhm.
just allowing yourself to notice. It's called like witness consciousness, almost like seeing yourself at a bird's eye view
Yeah.
and noticing, like, oh, I notice I'm feeling anxious right now. Like allowing more conscious awareness of your lived experience.
Mhm.
There's so much information to be had there.
Yeah.
And again, that does not require a week-long retreat in Costa Rica or investing $10,000 in a coach. These are things you can start with very root level. I think w- we all, at a base level, know what we need. We
Mhm.
do. We just have to get quiet and
Yeah.
honest enough with ourselves to take the step. That's where the courage has to come, right?
Yeah.
But just finding that quiet initially, I think there's so much there.
Yeah, I agree. And it's really difficult like you mentioned because there's so much noise around us,
So much
right?
noise.
That you just sometimes I know for myself, I'm like, "Ah, I need to go away or I need to get myself out of these distractions in order for that quiet to overcome me so I can do a deep reflection and find my purpose and my passion again and it can start talking to me
Yeah.
because I can listen now."
Yeah. It's, the I agree. I think there can be some of that initial need. I mean, I definitely had
Yeah.
that. I was like, get me over to Scandinavia so I don't have to deal with any of this, right? Which is at the end of the day a form of escapism, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so there's varying degrees of that. That can be finding yourself 45 minutes
Yeah.
on TikTok, that can be binging on Netflix, that could be going on the retreats, going on the vacations. And that's not, there's nothing inherently bad with that. That's okay.
Mhm.
But it's also noticing, what am I reaching for
Yeah.
in order to get this? So I think we can find ourselves, like, escapism is definitely one. Optimization, I think, is a
Mhm.
huge one right now, where we're just like, if I just had the right agenda, or if I
Yeah.
just had this calendar, or if I just had X, Y, and Z, I could optimize my life and then it would be fine. And I think that's another thing we can fall into, like, more doing,
Yeah.
right? Rather than just being with
Mhm.
ourselves. That's why I really like to introduce to people, like, just the idea of, like, driving to the grocery store with nothing on, right? It
Yeah.
doesn't cost you anything. It's not taking a lot of your time. We're not like flipping the dining room table on your life. You're just going to start to notice a little bit more, because some of these other strategies are really coping strategies, which may not
Mhm.
get us ultimately where we want to go.
Yeah, and then you kind of find yourself in this spiral a little bit. I definitely know I have. I have confirmed with myself I have an addiction to, like, investing in coaches, investing in programs, because
Mhm.
I'm trying to find myself in these other things. And it's like every time I invest and then I actually get the program, I'm like, why did I do that? Like, I didn't need to do that, right? So it is about just doing the free things right now, as uncomfortable as they may be, because there's that need to feel like you need to outsource and spend money on getting better. Just sit, just be quiet, just listen to
Yeah.
nothing but your own thoughts, and they'll start to get loud. And then you'll start to recognize, oh, okay, this is what I have to do, or this is what I'm supposed to be on my journey of doing, right?
Yeah, I mean, here I am. I'm sitting as a coach where I make
It's
a
the same.
living, right, off people investing in me. But I do have some, like, this. I think there's absolutely a time and place, but there
Yeah.
are so many people. I do discovery calls with people all the time, and I love them because I love connecting with people. And so often my advice is not yet,
Yeah.
because I what I don't like about the wellness industry is making people feel like it is something outside of them,
Yeah.
and that, that initial dopamine hit of, like, oh, I'm doing something about it though, because I just,
Mhm.
invested in
It's
this, so
invested. Yeah.
that'll be fine. I do think coaching, I do think, like, there's so many modalities that are amazing that do have a financial investment, but I think the come from is really important.
Mhm.
It's coming from a place of, like, you gotta fix me energy. I don't
Yeah, yeah.
that's
It's exactly what our patients
often.
are coming to us for, but,
Yeah.
like, in a different way. It's like that online coaching space. It's like, yeah, it's the same though.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I really think that the come from for me when I am, chatting with somebody, not to say that, you're not ready if you're not able to sit in silence, but I don't want it to be from a place of, I can't do this myself.
Yeah.
I really want people to feel empowered of, here's where I'm at, here's where I know where I'm at, here's where I want to be, and here's how I could use your help.
Yes,
And
exactly.
I think that's why all of my coaching is pretty much one-on-one. I don't do sort of the, like, super large group things, because I think
Mhm.
everybody's individual, everybody's path is individual. I don't have an XYZ approach to how to solve for your life.
Yeah.
It has to come from within you, and that takes time and energy in order to do it, but it's like
Yeah.
there's no time better spent. But it's I yeah, I think the wellness industry has made billions and billions of dollars off
Yes.
our, insecurities, and feeling that dopamine hit of, like, oh, this will fix me if I just do this 30-day
Mhm.
reset, I'll be fine.
Yeah.
And it's so much bigger than that.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think I just feel very strongly that I want bigger lifelong results for people. not
Yeah,
just a short-term Band-Aid. And sometimes some of these,
absolutely.
like, optimize your calendar strategies or, like,
Yes.
it's just not it. It might
Yeah,
feel good in the moment, but
yeah.
you'll be back in 6 months being like, "I still can't handle my life."
Yeah, I
Yeah,
need you there all the time. It's like, "Oh,
yeah.
no, you don't. We need to figure it out for you."
Yeah. Yeah, it's like empowering you to know yourself to the point where
Yeah,
you know the direction to take and you have the self-trust and self-confidence within yourself to take that action. And I, feel so honored to have been with people on that journey. But it's my like greatest day when people are like, I'm good. I got
yeah,
this. Like that's when I know I've done my job right, whether as a physio or a coach.
yeah.
That's my ultimate outcome is being with people on the journey to the point where they know they've got themselves.
Absolutely. And speaking of coaching, I did want to chat with you a little bit. So this is a really nice segue into it. But your coaching program looks like so much fun, especially your retreats.
Oh my
I'm
god.
like, oh my gosh, I want to know all about like how you even decided you wanted to do retreats and like the whole process that goes into working with you and who would be a good candidate to work with you as well.
Yeah, so it's so funny you mentioned retreats because literally just yesterday I almost booked a retreat space. I'll be totally transparent. I booked my first retreat on such a whim. I one
Oh.
of my like this would be one of my sort of distraction strategies is I love looking on Airbnb. Like, I
Yeah,
just
they're some
love
beautiful
seeing,
places.
like, different places. I also do, like, realtor.ca. I just, like I don't know, there's something about it. I would much rather scroll that than, like, scroll Instagram or
Yeah.
anything. So, anyway, this is probably, like, 3 or 4 years ago now. We were in deep pandemic time, so maybe 3 years ago. I found just, like, this most on brand bougie, fun Airbnb in Banff, Alberta.
Ooh.
And I don't know what came over me. I know that there was like a very loose cancellation policy. So I knew I wasn't like going to be out any money. I booked the space. I think this is like probably October. And I booked the space for June. And I think sent out an email to my email list being like, I just booked this space. Like, I'm going to host a retreat in Banff. Here's the dates. Like, I have no other details, but like, let me know if you're interested. I'll let you know once I have the details.
I don't know what we're going to talk about.
Like, well, we're figuring it out. We're building the plane on the way down. I had the most amazing women respond to that email being like, yeah, give me the details. Like I'm in, it's already in my calendar. My husband came home and I was like, so I did a thing today. And it just came together so easy. I had the most amazing group of 10 women and chiro, physio, and osteo all come out to Banff. I love planning trips. That's like brings me
Yeah,
a
I
lot
love
of
it.
energy. And like to be able to plan a trip with epic women, facilitate awesome conversation and connection. We had so much fun. We went whitewater rafting. We did high tea at the Banff Springs. We had all of these. We did an epic hike that we're still talking about to this day. Um, I was like, how is this work? And that was my whole goal. My business is called Press Play because when I came home from Scandinavia, I was like, I need to have more fun. And like, we
Yeah.
all need to have more fun. And so to bring healthcare practitioners out of their day to day to really like pattern interrupt, you know, whether it's wake up time or activity or who we're around, our environment, I just saw how transformative it was, not only for me, but then to be able to do that for others was just
Mhm.
so amazing. So my first retreat came together like so easy. It literally probably like by the end of that week, it was like filled, booked. I had like booked all of our stuff. I
That's
just went like full
amazing.
steam ahead. And yeah, it just became something that I became a part of my business of a mission I wanted to fulfill within the industry of like we need to make sure healthcare providers are feeling so supportive and cared for and yeah, having fun. So I've hosted 3 more since that time. We've done Muskoka,
Mhm.
We did an amazing retreat just this past June, and oh my gosh, I definitely want to host another one. There is at a retreat space just north of Kingston. I had
Okay.
27 women.
Wow.
It was an absolute blast. It was like I called it summer camp, but elevated in luxury. Because we all had our own beds and our own
We love
bathrooms
that.
and a private bath. But we had so much fun. I brought in a DJ and we had an absolute wild dance party. We did
Oh my
yoga. We did cannonballs into the lake. Like it was so fun. And so, yeah, it's just such a part of what I want to bring to this space. So, yeah, just yesterday, I found myself on Airbnb again. And my brain goes like all sorts of directions because honestly, I was looking at a beautiful space in Prince Edward County, but then somehow found myself looking at this like epic villa in Tuscany. So if y'all want to come to Italy with me in 2025, it's an absolute write off and we'll have so much fun. So yeah, it really is just for women looking for greater connection, looking to
Yeah.
reconnect not only with others, but also with themselves. And really I think through play, we really remind ourselves of our true essence.
Yeah.
And so that's what that's looking like. So nothing like set in stone, but I just know myself well enough to know that probably in the next 2 weeks, there will be something set in stone. So
Well, it sounds like so much fun, honestly. And I think that's one thing we lose as adults in general. We
yeah.
forget how to play. We forget how to bring out our inner child and nurture that part of us. So it's amazing that you get to host these fantastic retreats with amazing people and amazing women and do just that, right?
Yeah.
Play, have fun. Life isn't always so serious and so nitty gritty.
Yeah. And I think it's like that is the energy and the fuel we need to continue to be serving and pouring
Yeah.
into other people. And that's where I think burnout can happen is it's not about necessarily doing too much. It is really about not doing enough that like
Yeah.
fills you up and allows you to serve from a place of overflow.
Hmm.
And yeah, it's like still even, I mean, I'm 6 years into running my coaching practice and like it's still wild to me that like I like this is what I get to do as work.
So much
It doesn't
fun.
feel like work at all. And
Yeah.
that was the whole goal. And to be able to show that to other people is just like my greatest pleasure.
Oh my gosh. Well, it's been a blast chatting with you. I love following you on Instagram and seeing all the things you do. One day I'm going to end up at one of your retreats.
Please, yes.
Keeping on the record for that because they honestly look like so much fun.
We have a
But
blast.
yeah, and where can everyone find you, whether it be on Instagram or if you have a website?
Yeah, so probably best and quickest way to connect with me is on Instagram. My handle's at Press Play Physio. I love like I Instagram's a funny space. I love Instagram though for like my DMs. If
Yeah,
Instagram did not have DMs, I probably
you
wouldn't be
wouldn't be on
there.
Instagram. Yeah.
But even our connection, I connected with you via Instagram.
Yeah.
So I would love if people want to connect with me on Instagram, send me a DM. Let's like actually have a conversation. I love voice memos. Like we can actually talk. It doesn't have to be like, at such a distance. My website is emmajack.com. So just my name.com. I have lots of like resources on there, lots of blogs. And yeah, my email list, you can join from my website if you want to, hear from me on a somewhat regular basis.
Well, thanks. I know you my email list. I'm like somewhat regular.
Banana Republic. I don't email every 2 days. Twice a month max.
Oh my gosh, Emma, thank you so much for being on today. It's been such a pleasure chatting with you. And thank you everyone for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed the episode and we'll catch you at the next one.